Hello and welcome to this episode of the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. I'm your host today, and we're recording on a Friday afternoon, a couple of days after Manchester United lost against Copenhagen 4-3 out in Denmark. And I'm joined today for this episode by my colleagues Samuel Luckhurst and Rich Fay. I'll begin with Samuel because he was, of course, out in Denmark. That's only fair, I think, Rich. How are you, Samuel, to begin with?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah, it was a lovely city, lovely European trip. As often, the football is the great inconvenience of it, and it was a nightmare match to write. At 40 minutes, I was thinking this is great. United are playing really well. This should be pretty easy, and then it was seesawing, and unfortunately for United, it ended in the worst way possible with a defeat.
I mean, I must say, I think you did very well because your match report came out pretty quickly after the final whistle. Considering
as long as it was coherent and you know, grammatically sound.
To be fair, you probably drafted before the match United lose again, didn't you?
I didn't. No. I mean, sometimes it's become quite easy at the moment because there's always a banner in the stand, and that's always quite a good
colour.
It's good colour, and it can make for a decent intro. And I was trying not to be too cliched with it, but in the end it worked out quite well in terms of the writing of it. But I think we all agreed in the press room afterwards it was a terrible game to cover, because the other problem we have is that in European grounds, for whatever reason, whether it's the Allianz Arena or the Parken Stadium, there are not monitors. And I actually thought during the game of, you know, people at home just watching in the lounge where it's warm and they've got
he's trying to have a dig at me and you there, Rich.
And
I think he's trying to say we're the lucky ones.
You know what's going on. The people at the game.
I did send you a few messages after a few incidents because it is hard when you're at the match.
I know.
It's going so fast.
But that's the essence of going to the football used to be that, you know, someone went to a football game and they came back from it and they went into the pub, and people who hadn't been to the game, they'd be asking them, oh, what happened? And it's the other way around now. Someone who's been to the game will come into the pub and ask people who've been watching it on a telly what the hell happened with that red card or that disallowed goal, because people are none the wiser. So that really didn't help. And I think Simon Peach flagged that on the team sheet, the way they'd put the wrong name of the referee. Like it was, the team sheet was a little bit all over the place, apparently, as far as the officials were concerned. So suddenly we were worried that maybe we were directing possible death threats to the wrong referee if they were indeed coming in from Manchester United fans, but I suspect they weren't.
Well, what have UEFA and Rich PLC got on common, Rich? Both messy organisations.
Messy organisations.
How are you?
Yeah, decent. As decent as I can be, I suppose, this week. But yeah, like Samuel said, it was a bizarre game to cover, wasn't it, on Wednesday night? A really difficult one that to and fro from side to side. And I suppose that also makes analysing it a bit tricky, because there will be a huge majority of United fans, I think, who will take positives like Ten Hag has from the performance. But ultimately they've lost again, and their Champions League hopes are dangling by a thread. So I suppose it's whether you're a glass half empty or half full sort of supporter this week.
It was a very weird performance in that regard, Samuel, because, I mean, for the opening 40 minutes, they were excellent. It was the best they've played all season. I was thinking, who's this team? What have they done with Manchester United? 2 goals up. The game changes as soon as the red card happens. We'll get into that in a second. But that 40 minutes was excellent, wasn't it?
The first goal was terrific. That was so good, I didn't need a replay to appreciate it. Unfortunately, I was just at the start of the game. If your head's buried in a laptop, then there's something wrong with you, really. Obviously, we contribute to the blogs every now and then, but you pick and choose your moments, and everyone hit their cues with that goal. It was such a beautifully worked goal, going from left to right, quickening the play here and there. Good poachers finished by Højlund. And the Parken Stadium, although it is atmospheric, I don't think any of us described it or billed it as hostile going into the game, because it's not known for that, really. And it certainly wasn't a hostile crowd to play in front of. And Jakob Nistrup, the Copenhagen coach, said afterwards that of the 4 Champions League performances they've had this season, it was their weakest. And you know, that just goes to show you how well United play, but also how galling it must have been, and it clearly was. You saw it etched on their faces that they lost the game, because even in the second half, for the majority of it, they managed it very well. They regained the lead. Their game management was good in places. There was a moment where Garnacho won a foul and Maguire was telling him to stay down. And I thought, well, this is maturity on Garnacho's part. It's maturity on United's part, having looked a mess for most of the season. But a theme of their Champions League campaign this season has been in every defeat, there have been these goal gluts. Bayern Munich, I think, got 2 in 4 minutes. Galatasaray got 2 in 10 minutes. Copenhagen in each half the other night. The first 2 goals were in 9 minutes, and the third and the fourth goal.
It's happening in the Premier League as well. That's the thing, hasn't it? Conceding in quick succession.
Score quickly and then they will concede. And of course, it was an 83rd minute goal and an 87th minute goal. And when that's happening, there's a reason for it. You can't just dismiss it. And unfortunately, this team is just so mentally fragile. And I'm not picking on him again. I'm sure people might have listened to the podcast the other week, but you look at that third goal, and Dalot 4 days earlier is in the same position with Harry Wilson. He gets the challenge in, and then he celebrates it on his Instagram account. And of course, he's put in the same position again. He dozes, and it's an equaliser. And Højlund went ballistic, and he didn't go ballistic at just United conceding. He went ballistic specifically at Dalot, and you can understand it because he scored 5 goals for United. And every time he scored for them, he's lost. And I didn't necessarily agree with taking Højlund off at that time as well, especially as Mason Mount came on, and the question, what does Mason Mount do? People are asking it again, having watched that. But it was an unusual defeat for United, and that for the majority of it, they did play well. But the bigger picture is that they're bottom of their group after 4 games, and they've lost more games than they've won this season.
I mean, even in that second half, Rich, to come out with a man down, but you couldn't really tell. Copenhagen didn't assert like I thought they would. United were passing the ball around well. They looked quite confident, and they were threatening on the counter-attack, and you probably thought with the pace of Højlund and Garnacho, they were definitely capable of getting a result. They get the penalty just after the hour mark with Bruno Fernandes, well taken, you think the result's on here. As Samuel said, we see it time and time again, where they concede in quick succession. At elite level, that's just not good enough. You can't do that. Dalot was caught Steven for the 3rd. We'll get onto Rafael Varane for the 4th, because I don't know what he was doing for that 4th goal. But it was just a mess, those final 10 minutes of the game, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there is almost this kind of quirk in football where going down to 10 men can almost just make your game plan simpler, because United don't have an onus on them to try attack them. They can play to their strengths, which is being a counter-attacking team. We saw that in Copenhagen. United's best chances came when they broke. It was either building up from the back, or the second goal where they win it high up. That's a high press, and then they attack really lethal, quick interchanges there. And when you go down to 10 men, the second half, like I said, I think they were really good. I do think that the way they finished the first half, they just lost their heads a little bit. It was leadership on the pitch there. I got absolutely hammered on social media for saying they didn't have good game management. But I think in the closing stage of the first half, that really cost them. They got rattled and they let it affect them. I mean, you look, 13 months earlier, Man City went to Copenhagen. Sergio Gomez got sent off after half an hour. They drew the game 0-0 because game management. I think after the break, United were brilliant at that. They really were. But once again, it was individual errors, and that has been such a key issue all season. And these players who used to be reliable simply are just making unacceptable mistakes. And you might look at the injury record, and that's a contributing factor to Dalot, because he wouldn't be playing left back if they had a choice. It would be Luke Shaw or Malacia. He's 3rd at best, really, there. Maybe in Reguilon will go ahead of him this weekend, who knows, in terms of the pecking order. So there are certain players who are in unfortunate positions, but fundamentally, whether you look at the injury record, you look at, summer signs not bedding in properly, United just haven't been good enough in key moments so far this season. And like you said, that's what cost them in the end on Wednesday night, because for you to lose a player that early on, you can point the 10 men all you want, but United still did regain the lead in that game. So the 10 men wasn't a problem when United weren't 3-2 up. And Garnacho was at McTominay shushing the home crowd. That was the siege mentality that United need to embrace, really. And I think Wednesday night for me just proved that United do need to play to their strengths. Ten Hag might have this idea of how he wants his team to play. The injury situation has affected that. They can't get the momentum, the consistency and the confidence to actually implement that style of play. I think I read as well he's had 11 different back 4 combinations in the last 16 matches. That is ridiculous. You can see why United's results have been so inconsistent and not been able to build up momentum. So before you can do that, you just need to play to your strengths, and that is United playing on the counter-attack. And ultimately, like you said, the issue I think on Wednesday night was just those key errors right at the end, and it just begs the question where United go next, because obviously we'll hopefully get an update on Evans at the press conference on Friday, but he is well ahead of Rafa Varane now in the pecking order. And if Varane's fit to play against Luton, do you actually start him after what we've seen? Because every time a team sheet drops, you keep on saying, why the hell's Varane on the bench? And then you watch him play. That's why he's on the bench. He's just fundamentally not been good enough. And it's the same with Casemiro being out injured now. People saying, when he comes back in, he'll be brilliant. He was pretty poor against Newcastle, and then he goes off a hamstring injury. These players just fundamentally haven't been good enough at the end of the day, and you could point at other factors at the club, but it's individual error letting United down time and time again.
I was going to discuss Varane a bit more in the second part, but we might as well just go for it now. Obviously, it's a natural segue. As Rich said, incredibly poor. We all kind of questioned, me and Tyrone did actually on the last podcast, why he'd been starting over Johnny Evans. But of course, Ten Hag likes Maguire on the right and a different player on the left. He doesn't like playing Varane on that side, on the left side. So in that regard, it kind of made sense why he wasn't playing, but I suspected there was something going on, me personally. But as Ty suggested, his form's just not been that good when he's played this season. He's, dare I say, it's signs of decline, Samuel. I mean, that fourth goal, when he kind of kicks it up, he takes a heavy touch, he looks to panic, and it eventually leads to the Copenhagen goal. That was really, really poor.
It was so inelegant, and he was doing that in the first half as well. I mean, it's quite an nuanced situation with Varane, because when you look at how often he's started over the last 5 and a bit weeks, he started one game. If someone has started one game, they're not going to be at their optimum coming into the team. And I think Ten Hag has to be held accountable for that, because however decent Johnny Evans has looked in games, he did get rinsed by Manchester City. He is a 35-year-old. He also did have injury issues last season, and this was the first time that he played in back-to-back matches within 4 days to each other, 4 days between each other. I think he played in back-to-back games against Brentford and Sheffield United, but of course there was a 2-week break there. This is the first time he's kept his place essentially without a break. And of course, he pulls up within 15 minutes. Is anybody surprised by that? No, because I think the suspicion all along when Evans was getting these starts was that he can start one game a week because he's 35, because he had injuries last season, because he's had a long career. With Varane, there's another centre-half who everyone suspects can only start one game a week. And United have been trying to frame his omissions or his bench roles as, oh no, he's not injured. When he wasn't in the squad against Brentford, they said he's not injured, he just needed a couple more days rest. And you think, okay, I mean, they got beaten in midweek by Galatasaray, and that was on Tuesday. This is Saturday. And there's an international break, and he doesn't play international football anymore. The international break happens, Sheffield United's away, where's Rafael Varane? He's on the bench. So immediately people are starting to think, this is beyond suspicious, this. Fulham at the weekend, last week, that was a hugely important game for United, and it's Evans and Maguire, and it's framed as, we want him to be absolutely, the big game coming up against Copenhagen, his optimum needs to be really ready for that. And I'm thinking, okay, well, he's not been injured recently, he's been unwell, but still, okay, all right, we're dubious of it. And then, of course, we go to Copenhagen and it's Evans and Maguire, and you think, okay, whatever you say now, we're not going to believe you. We were barely believing you in the first place. And I still go back to Ten Hag's explanation. I asked him after the City game, why did you play Johnny Evans over Rafael Varane? And his outlook on it is that Maguire is a right-sided centre-half and he's playing quite well, so he deserves to be in on merit. And his competitor on the right side of defence is Varane. So one of them can only play. Maguire's the inform. It's Maguire. Evans, who started his international career in Northern Ireland as a left-back, and he's got a left peg on him. And he also played left-back a handful of times for United. So he's more suited to playing in that role than any other available centre-back, because Lindelof's right-footed, Varane's right-footed, there's no Luke Shaw to step in, and of course Lisandro Martinez is injured as well. So that's why I think Ten Hag, it's a very Dutch way of looking at it, of like the Louis van Gaal, got to have a right footer, got to have a left footer, got to be completely balanced. it is, of course, undermined by then having Diogo Dalot at left-back, who is a right-footer. And they've got an available left-back in Sergio Reguilon, who was also one of Ten Hag's signings in the transfer window. And I get that was very late in the day. It was an emergency loan, effectively, because Luke Shaw did his hamstring. And really, Ten Hag's selection policy with Reguilon at the moment would indicate that he will be dumped back at Tottenham in January, because they have that break clause. And if Malacia and Shaw are fit, I don't see how they keep hold of Reguilon, because at the moment Ten Hag has, well, not at the moment, he's played Lindelof at left back ahead of him, and he's played Dalot at left back ahead of him. So that would be the one area of the whole Varane handling that you would say completely undermines it, because if you're so fixated on having left footers on that side, then you've got to play Reguilon, but he hasn't been the last 2 games. He's played Dalot there. And yeah, look, Varane during his time at United, he's been brittle, and maybe Ten Hag's got to the point now, I can't count on him. But again, there's a counterpoint to it. You can't turn to Johnny Evans and expect him to be robust, because he isn't. He had a lot of injury issues last season at Leicester, and there was a reason why Leicester were happy. Not happy necessarily, but everyone knew that he was coming to the end of his contract and he wasn't going to get a new contract there. And as well as United playing the first 40 minutes, when I looked at that team the other night and I counted, like I think I wrote it in the blog, that 6 managers, I think, of the starting 11, they'd made their first appearance under 6 managers. Going from Ferguson to Ten Hag, that's unsustainable. And a central defensive partnership of Evans and Maguire is also unsustainable. Okay, Evans came off after 15 minutes the other night, but it's not a defensive record where you look at it and say that's a compelling case to continue with them, and you can't continue with them just because of the limitations there. And there are times with Ten Hag and his selection strategy, and I do think, okay, Varane the other night, he was appalling. He was United's worst player, and the accountability mainly has to be with the player, but he's been chronically underplayed in recent weeks, and that has had a major bearing, not just on his performance, but of course that result, because it was his sliced or hacked clearance, his panicky hit that led to the 4th goal.
I guess Ten Hag's putting his tactical principles over personnel, but to do it to this extent, to play Evans over Varane, I know Samuel said there's reasons, etc. Are you surprised at it? I mean, would any other manager in the Premier League stick by the principles that much? Because it seems quite extreme, especially considering Evans' injury record, etc.
Yeah, I think there comes a time where the ends justify the means, and you've got to almost, like I say, put these stylistic plans on hold, because right now, what's more important for United? Playing attractive football and losing, or playing ugly football and winning? You've just got to get the results, because, like I said, to implement a style of play, Ten Hag fundamentally needs to have his best 11 or close to it available. Of course, having your best 11 every week is just not sustainable. That just doesn't happen in football. Every manager has to play about the preferred 11. It's very rare you get them all on the pitch at the same time. But United, the injury situation's certainly been a factor in all that. But what needs to happen now is Ten Hag wants consistency. Like we said, the chopping and changing of personnel is unsustainable. So he needs to get a core nucleus of about 7 or 8 players. And I know he said prior to the game he wants about 30, was it 12
or 13
players who are predominantly playing every single game, coming on from the bench or whatever. I mean, starting with 13 players would probably help United right now. It's probably the only way of turning things around. But, they need to have that stability. So from one point of view, you can understand why he's sticking with people like Maguire, people like McTominay, because you know what you're going to get as much as you know what you're not going to get from them. But they are consistent, and you know exactly what you will get from them. You're not surprised when you see McTominay struggle as a defensive midfielder, and then he makes a good darting run into the box. That is what he does. No surprise there. So for United to build this sort of momentum up, a bit of it will rely on injured players returning. International break could come at a good time for that. But they fundamentally just need to start winning games, start getting their confidence back, get a bit of consistency. And then once the confidence is there, you've got some players back who are available again, you could start working on the style of play again. But right now, when you're already struggling for form and momentum, you can't be asking these players to do much more than than what they're doing already. They've just got to be trying to
And
win
we
matches.
saw that last season after the opening 2 defeats against Brighton and Brentford.
Yeah, you've
when
almost got to
Ten
go
Hag
back to
went to a
basics.
pragmatic style, they won 4 on the trot, Liverpool, Arsenal, etc., big games. And it was more counter-attack and pragmatic,
Yeah.
but it worked, didn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I said about on Wednesday night as well. United's best football, like I said, they controlled the game a lot better, and you can probably merge the two styles where you're more comfortable in your own half, but when you go across that halfway line, they're still so poor at breaking teams down, and they still really do struggle because Fernandes, he's a risk taker, who almost contradicts Ten Hag's whole style of play. Eriksen, the irony is United have basically replaced Juan Mata and Matic with Casemiro and Eriksen, who are doing exactly the same roles, who are both on the decline at the moment and have certain matches where they look excellent and certain matches where they're getting exposed at the moment. And you can't really break down teams with the players United have available right now. So they've just got to play to their strengths. Hoyland has a lot of work to do to be a proper hold-up striker, but he's amazing when he makes those runs into the box. Garnacho, Rashford, the same. They're these wingers who, they don't track back enough. They're not that good at sort of holding the play up and bringing others into play. But what they're good at is running at defenders, cutting inside, having a shot at goal. So, like I said, I think right now, United are looking for a long-term fix, but they need a short-term one, and that is, they spent 400 million, but they need to play like they did into Solskjaer basically, because that is the only way for them to sort of tread water for now, get the players back, and then they can think again about trying to play closer to how Ten Hag wants them to do, because it's just delusional to try and make that team play his style of football, because they fundamentally can't do it.
You can kill the man, but you can't kill the idea, can you, Richard? With Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and his tactics. We'll be back in the room for part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, the big part of the game, and we kind of alluded to it in the first part, was the red card, Samuel. So do you really want to get stuck into that? Because
we can be succinct, can't we?
It was incredibly controversial. I mean, Rashford, there was no... he wasn't being malicious in the tackle. He was looking to protect the ball. It happens at 5-a-side every week, as you well know, with my challenges next to you. And look, it's obviously split opinion. Understandably, United fans were raging online at the decision, especially when, I think it was the Europa League last night, it was Real Sociedad were playing. Identical challenge comes in, and it's a yellow card. But I think that's what's so annoying, because there's no consistency.
I think with that one last night, it was more on the guy's foot than his shin. I understood why it was a red card, because if you go studs up, especially in UEFA competition, you're treading a fine line there. That's how officious they can be. And that referee the other night, I thought he was out of his depth. He was officious. The problem I had with it was the VAR process. One, the big screen said check over or check complete. And then all of a sudden the referee is indicating that he's going to the monitor. So it clearly wasn't check over. So already there's a communication cock up there. And it was only later that when someone sent me a link that was clearly taken from a stream, and I've no shame in admitting that, because there were no monitors provided. But it showed what the referee saw, and of course there was slow-mo and there was freeze framing. VAR purports to be an objective system, and I've said this before, I know, but it is applied far too subjectively. I mean, last week we had this nonsense of a subjective offside, and it's getting to the point now where these robots in their booths are looking at something and they're thinking, is there a way we can disallow this goal? Is there a way we can get this guy sent off? And as Ten Hag said afterwards, that's not what football should be about. So if the referee had given him a red card straight away, I'd have understood that, and it was difficult to see. I mean, I don't think anybody saw it clearly at the time and thought, oh, that's definitely a red card. You thought maybe there was a coming together or an accidental, maybe Rashford trod on him or what have you. But we saw with Casemiro last season when he got sent off against Southampton that if you raise your studs and it's catching an opponent's shin, chances are you're in trouble.
You're leaving yourself open to
and if that had happened against United, I imagine that these United fans who don't tire of complaining about referees, which is remarkable, because look, as useless as the referees are, it is tedious, fans just complaining about referees, because it's whataboutery this, whataboutery that. Ultimately, you're not going to get yourself anywhere with it, because the officials are so bad that they don't apply the law consistently. And I suppose that would be my other area where you have some sympathy for Rashford. Having said that, it's been going on for so long. When you play in European competition, laws are applied very, very differently. It feels like the handball law in Champions League games is like the definition of it is just redrafted compared to the Premier League. It's struggled to keep up with that. And Ten Hag said that afterwards. He said he didn't think it should have been a penalty against United. The one where they could feel absolutely hard done by was Copenhagen's first goal, which was offside. There was someone in an offside position in Onana's eye line. I think was it Caicedo who had a goal disallowed at Tottenham on Monday night for an offside that I thought was a lot more tenuous than the Copenhagen goal, and it was chalked off for Chelsea. The referee was not good. I mean, Maguire got penalised for that, for a foul at the end when he hit the crossbar, which was a non-foul.
Imagine if that had gone in.
And exactly, because the idiot referee had blown his whistle. So if it'd gone in, they wouldn't have been able to give the goal retrospectively, because the clown had blown far too early. And Maguire somehow got booked for it. I assume possibly because he was telling the referee that he was doing a crap job or something like that, rather than the foul. I'd like to think it was more for dissent than the actual foul. And I suppose the other aspect of the Rashford decision that was really opaque was that on UEFA's website they suggested he'd been sent off for his arm catching.
You think that was just
opponent.
more human error, wouldn't you? I mean, even more human error, that's the problem.
On the bloggers' part, yeah. I mean, you'd never make an error like that, Stephen. I'd like to think I never did in my live blogging days either. But so with all this going on, it was not great not having any replays available. But I still think the referee did. If they went about it in the wrong way, but they made the right call in that. I do think it was a red card, but the whole process of VAR leading to it, I thought was shambolic.
I think we'll move on then, Rich, because we don't want to make this a referee podcast. But you can. I'll give you 10 seconds.
No, what I was also going to say on that is, it's a huge factor in the game. But I don't think you can just point at that and say that's the reason United lost, because they retake the lead. You know, like I said, they turn into a mess for 10 minutes. And Copenhagen first goal shouldn't have been a goal. I think the penalty, again, as Samuel said, UEFA competition, it's happened. You know, you can't. I think the penalty is not as much as a controversial call as the red card is, and you know, I think it's either both penalties are given or neither of those penalties are given on Wednesday night. So what do you want? You either both don't get a goal, or you both do get a goal. It doesn't affect the result in the end. And like we said, United retake the lead in the second half, and then it's individual errors that cost them. So as much as the Rashford red card changed the momentum and swung it back and gave Copenhagen a lift and that belief again, United still contributed to their own downfall.
Completely. It's just a shame because that opening 40 minutes was so promising.
Yeah.
It was.
If he hadn't have got sent off, they would not have
would
lost
have comfortably
that
have won.
They'd have. Like, I mean, Ten Hag even kind of like chuckled at it afterwards when a Danish journalist said, "Do you think the result was unfair?" And he said, "You know, did you see us in the first 25 minutes?"
He's been doing that a few times actually. I've noticed the last two games. He's been laughing at questions, just a little Dutch razor smile. We'll focus in a bit more on Ten Hag then, Rich. If we look at that bench, Sofian Amrabat, Mason Mount, Anthony, Sergio Reguilon, all Ten Hag signings. Obviously, Anthony was signed last summer. 3 of them were signed this summer. It's been a bit of a mess, the recruitment, hasn't it? I keep using that word this season, mess. But I mean, you talk about Harry Maguire starting, McTominay starting. Ten Hag wanted to get rid of those players. He's using players that he didn't want. West Ham were looking to sign them both. And you look at that
they would have both been
team,
allowed to leave if big enough offers had come in for them this summer. United were prepared to move on from them and get more players in Ten Hag's mould. And that's what annoys me so much, is that even when you watch the game on Wednesday night, you say, God, that's why United need a new centre-back. Where is the evidence that United will go out and buy a centre-back who will be good enough straight away and improve that defence? I know you point to Lisandro Martinez, but do you want a right-sided version of him as well in that United back line or not? Because I don't see that happening or functioning too well. And like you said, that's the hypocrisy of United at the moment. And it, again, sort of plays into the earlier message about them needing to change their style of play, because Ten Hag's bought these players who he wanted to be integral to how his team would play going forward, but they can't even get on the pitch now. So you are playing Solskjaer's players and you're playing Solskjaer's football, but you spent £400 million. And what is so bizarre about it all is, like we said, you look at Wednesday night, you look at all these things, you can always point at someone else for, that's why we're not doing well. That went against us. Error there, error there, error there. You spent £400 million on players who are not getting on, most of them aren't getting on the pitch. Yes, you can look at injuries or whatever, but ultimately, performances haven't been good enough and Ten Hag's players haven't been good enough. The transfer hit rate has been close to abysmal, really. You look at Anthony, I know we're going about him every week. He probably is United's worst ever signing right now. He's in line to be it, because what has he done? The right wing issue is still a bigger problem as it always was before he signed. And like I said, Martinez is someone we're clinging on to, but Casemiro, his stock has fallen massively.
It's funny how quick football changes, because at the end of last season, we were looking at those signings thinking it was brilliant. Yeah. But he spent even more money in the summer. And
they're even less certain of the squad. I mean, Casemiro has been ruled out till Christmas. And even with Casemiro ruled out, the Casemiro alternative they signed is on the bench. And it's Scott McTominay there again, who we know can't play defensive midfield.
But Amrabat's awful, Samuel. I mean, just say it how it is. There was a clip of him coming on, a few of the touches that he was receiving the ball, kind of fumbling.
The one that stands out is when the ball was pulled back to him and he just straight away prodded it into the area without having a look who was there, just hoping it would go near anyone, and it didn't go near anyone. I mean, it's great for us in a way, because you have these cranks on Twitter who are like, yeah, sign this guy, sign Alex Telles, sign Donny van der Beek, sign Sofiane Amrabat. They haven't got a clue about them, and we don't profess to watch them on a weekly basis. But I did think it might not be a good idea signing someone from Serie A, which is a Premier League dumping ground, teeming with Premier League rejects.
You look at his pedigree, you look at his CV, you look what he's achieved. You watch him a few times.
And he tackled Mbappe, so did Twanzebe.
And you make your own calculations from there. But there's a lot of people on social media, kind of a hipster community, who look at the analytics and they like to suggest that because he tackled Mbappe at the World Cup and he's got a few good stats, that he's the answer.
Yeah, and in fairness to, going back to it, there were some people at United who were raising red flags saying probably shouldn't be going for him, but eventually Ten Hag got his way, and that's the flaw of the structure at the club. And a manager's not going to get it right every time with a choice of player he goes for. I mean, Ferguson didn't. United's recruitment hit rate, if you're talking about the last 10 years, it goes way back beyond that. It goes back to Ferguson's latter years at the club. There weren't too many outright successes on his watch there. There was the odd gem, of course, like Javier Hernandez, but for every Javier Hernandez, there was a Bebe. And as good a player as Antonio Valencia was in the same summer, they signed Gabriel Oberton.
I can't be taking Gabriel Oberton criticism, Samuel. What a player. Ronaldo's replacement.
Anderson has this cult following among United players because he was an extremely successful player for the club. But he was not a good player for the club. He was overweight from start to finish, and he was probably overhyped as well. But by virtue of his association with success and a couple of key moments he was involved in along the way and some good spells of form, he's remembered extremely fondly, having played under Ferguson as well. So, I mean, the Reguilón thing, as I said earlier, if you're signing a left back, at least have the intent to play him and have that balance. And look, with Reguilón, we all know about his limitations, and he was another player United Twitter was banging on about a few years ago with Telles about why they should sign him. And really, at that time, they didn't actually need a left back. Shaw was playing well. Brandon Williams had come in and had done well. And signing Telles, I'm not saying that Brandon Williams would have gone on and been brilliant for United, but that did pretty much kill Brandon Williams' United career. And
again, you've got Alvaro Fernandez. Why not just give him a chance? He's out there in Spain.
I half thought that as well. Yeah. Because Reguilón can't, he's decent going forward. He can't defend. There's a reason why he's Tottenham's...
You can't make it at Tottenham, though.
Yeah, he's Tottenham's third choice left back, and they were more than happy to get him off the books until January at the least, even. So, if United want to moan about dealing with Daniel Levy, it seems like they had quite an easy dealing with Daniel Levy over getting Reguilón in. Mason Mount, I don't know why United signed him. I thought it was very dubious at the time, and if you're not even playing him in a game where you need some composure, you need some wiliness, this is someone who's won the Champions League as well. You have to question why on earth did they sign him?
Did he come on as a false nine? I think Ten Hag actually played him through the middle when he came on.
The Sancho role from pre-season, but
Samuel messaged me a few weeks ago about your Mason Mount comments, and I said, look, I think it's a bit too early. I think he's still got time to turn it around, but as time goes on, Samuel's looking more right and I'm looking more wrong, I'm afraid
He's got
to
time
say.
to turn it around, but he needs a fixed position and he needs to be playing every week. And the fact that he's not even getting into this motley crew midfield just says it all, doesn't it? I mean, again, Ten Hag has signed someone and doesn't know how to use him.
But that's why Ten Hag's power in regard to transfers needs to be revoked. We've talked about it at length on this podcast, the mess that transfers is. Obviously, John Murdoch is the football director, but Ten Hag has a lot of influence. That squad is his squad. He's got so many of his own signings that he pushed for. I mean, when Ratcliffe comes in, if he does this minority stake that looks set to be complete in the next week or so, that's something he has to do, Rich. He has to sort that out because it's not working at the moment, and it hasn't worked over the last 10 years or so with the managers coming in, telling the board who they want. There needs to be a structure above the manager, telling them, right, this is who you're going to sign, this is our principles, and this is the philosophy is going to be aligned, really.
Yeah, I think it's one of those sort of plans where there's got to be input from Ten Hag, and like you said, he should be able to say, look, I want this sort of player.
Of course, but you can't have everything you want.
Exactly. Yeah. He should go. Look at next summer if he's still in charge. He should go to the board and say, look, I want a right-sided centre back who can play out from the back because that's what I want from my defender. Go get me a short list of players, and they will say, look, these are the.
You can't have any Dutch ones, okay?
Yeah,
you've had enough, and no one from the Eredivisie.
Yeah. Do you know them? Right, we're not signing them. So here's 3 players. This is our first choice. Would you be happy if we signed him? Yeah. This is our second choice. Would you be happy if we signed him? Yeah. Third choice? No, I wouldn't want him in my team. Okay, we'll bin him off then. We'll go for these 2.
But that's common sense, isn't it?
And this is how much money we'll pay. If they want more than that, we will walk away because we do not think they're worth more than that, and we will park it for another 6 months. But it'll be on us. It won't be on you, Eric. It'll be on us if that doesn't happen. And that's the way it should be. It should be. It's just so disjointed at the moment where for a long time you didn't know who was making the decisions. Now you can tell that Ten Hag's influence has gone way too much to the other side. I'm not saying take all the power from him, let him have some input, but it just needs to be a more open conversation, and they need to have stricter sort of self-restraint from the start of it. You look at, here we go again, you look at Anthony. It gets sort of takes back to the Moyes signing with Fellaini. It's like, this is the price we will pay. If we don't sign by this date, we move on. In both instances, they've gone back and paid more for the player than they were originally going to anyway. You just need to have more, just stricter regulations, really, and impose it on yourself, because United will only be taken seriously in the transfer market when they start acting seriously anyway. And, you know, their reputation in the transfer market is justified because you only have to look at it from the outside, and you don't have to have much knowledge of what goes in behind the scenes to realise that United are a laughingstock and teams always try and milk them for more money, and invariably they get that money.
It's Groundhog Day on this podcast as usual, and I think we've had the same conversations over the last 3 years or so. I mean, Sir Jim Ratcliffe called the Fred investment dumb money. What would he call the Anthony money? I don't think we could use those words in this podcast because it is supposed to be clean.
Not. Possibly not, no.
We'll leave it there for part 2. We'll be back in a moment for part 3. Welcome back to part 3 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, Samuel, in terms of the Champions League hopes and what it actually means, they're at the bottom of the group. Copenhagen and Galatasaray above them. Bayern Munich are obviously going to win the group. It's Galatasaray next, away at Turkey. It's not. That doesn't look very good, does it? To say the least.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting trip, that one.
It's a barefoot Galatasaray at best, and they're going to make it incredibly difficult. They're going to really fancy their chances when United visit.
As well they should as well. I mean, the best case scenario for United going into that game would have been they'd have been on 6 points and Galatasaray on 4, and of course Galatasaray is still above them in the table, so it's geared up for it. Galatasaray, I think, will also expect Bayern Munich to ensure that Copenhagen don't win, and that does them a favour, so that can fuel them. But just having United on home territory, United have not won at Galatasaray. They have won in Istanbul, but they've never beaten Galatasaray there. And of course, it was November '93 when they made that first infamous trip there, and it's 30 years on. So there's so much for Galatasaray fans to lap up. I'm sure maybe the old timers who are now in their 60s or 70s, they'll dust off their old shirts and their placards saying "Welcome to Hell," and
There'll be more banners for your match report, I think, in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think there might be more than just banners waiting for us in store out there.
Some white flags from the away end.
Yes, yeah, it's I'm fascinated to see what it will be like. I've not been to Istanbul before, so just going to Istanbul, I'm very lucky to be going there and just seeing what that's like. Never mind actually going to a football match there, and there's a hell of a lot riding on it as well. I mean, if United lose, they're out of the Champions League, and look, I'd like to make it clear now to United that as far as Champions League this group stage goes, please just finish fourth or finish second. Don't finish third.
Well, I was about to come on to that. Why do you think that? Because I understand games and you don't want to be in the Europa League. However,
it does be a Europa League playoff round again as well.
More games like that I do get, but they're not going to get top 4 this season. You'd have to be mad to think they are.
They might do.
Well, the quirk is that if they finish 5th, they would get Champions League on this coefficient.
And there's the coefficient
That's
thing
true,
as well.
yeah, because the way it's working.
And that would be the most United thing ever, to finish 5th.
It's
stumble into it.
But we also talk about this Champions League as United. Like, I understand from United's financial point of view why they need to finish in the top 4. But it's almost like, why do you want to finish 4th just to get knocked out in the group stage next season anyway? I don't have this faith they're going to do it anyway. Like Samuel said, 4th would be better than
I think with the Europa League, with the Europa League as well, like, in terms of why wouldn't they want to be in it? One, they have won it. 2, it's just it is a dire competition. When you go to the press conferences, sometimes you'd like United player just to be completely authentic, say like, I don't want to be in this competition. I don't want to be sat here talking to you on a Wednesday night. I want to be playing on a Wednesday night. Like really, really demean the competition.
Nobody dreams of the Europa League theme tune.
Exactly. You know, there is something really soul destroying about covering it, even though it's got that carrot of if you win it, you get into the Champions League.
And I think that's going to be a very important carrot this season.
But it's also what even if the scheduling.
I think even if they were to win it as well, maybe I'm diminishing it slightly, but like they always used to say about Solskjaer, he got to a European final. He did get to a European final, having gone out of the Champions League that season. Like the whole thing that they did really well to get to Europa League final, they didn't.
But they're out of the Carabao Cup. Are they really going to win the FA Cup when Manchester City and the like are in the competition? I have my doubts. I mean, obviously it's possible.
I think it's.
But the Europa League is surely, pardon me, a more viable route to silverware.
Yeah, I don't think for 1 second Ten Hag is going to say, look, let's toss it off and ensure that we finish bottom of the group if we are to really bottom out here. But I say it purely selfishly that that there is something quite mundane about the Europa League, and it is demoralising. It was last season it was a bit different in that they got Barcelona in the playoff.
Two fantastic games.
At that point, the eyes of the world were genuinely fixated on the Europa League in February for the first time ever, probably. It's very rare that you get such a pulsating draw in that competition at that stage. And the games lived up to billing as well. They were 2 really, really memorable matches to watch and to cover. But I suspect that was an anomaly last season.
Nicely done, Samuel. Good pronunciation there. From one European giant in Barcelona, Rich, to an English giant in Luton Town, coming to Old Trafford on Saturday afternoon. I mean, they just got a draw against Liverpool, actually. They're well organised and they're quite good.
Mengi.
Yeah,
the old boys back together.
United
Ross
lads.
Barkley, Townsend.
Mengi was actually quite good. I don't know if you watched the game. Impressed. He was quite sharp, so fair play. And it's nice to see him have a run without injury as well. He deserves a bit of luck. It should be straightforward, though. Luton at home.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? You'd think so.
Got anything else to add, Rich? Any more insight?
Well, this is Manchester United. This isn't it. This is Manchester United.
This is Manchester United.
Yeah, but Luton at home is as easy as Crystal Palace at home after you've just beaten them in the League Cup. It's as easy as, 2.5 years ago, Sheffield United at home that United somehow lost.
Oh, they lost that, yeah.
United cannot have any complacency. Luton will be well up for this. Having just taken the point off Liverpool again that they could, and maybe feel they should have won as well. I know that they rode the luck at times and the goal right at the end will be kicking the teeth. But they'll be feeling so confident because they've proven that they can do it against a much better team than United, and they could have won that game. They will go to Old Trafford and they will not be frightened anymore. United have already lost 5 games over the season. In 4 of those they've conceded 3 goals. We saw what Forest did. I know they're quite lucky when they took a 2-goal lead early on, but any team will fancy their chances of scoring at Old Trafford right now. And United are a wounded beast. And the quirk of it all is United are still going to be heavy favourites to win on Saturday. So it is still a free hit for Luton. United just cannot have any complacency whatsoever. It's all those cliches. If you start as equals, you need to earn the right to play on that game. But, if United aren't at 100%, then they'll be there for the taking. And if Luton can, force an early corner, get an early chance, get the home crowd who will already been protesting against the Glazers pre-match on the back of the United players, then, it's got the makings of another banana skin. But that says so much about United that there's a fear about playing Luton at home, which, no disrespect to them, should be the biggest banker he could have in the season. But we saw it Sheffield United away as well. I know they've won since then, but they were arguably better against United than they were in that game against Wolves as well. So, United have this ability of making
There's never a penalty
team.
against Wolves as well, was
exactly.
It? It was a dreadful decision.
In terms of changes then quickly, would you like to see any Varane maybe come back into the team? I know we've alluded to that. And I've just wrote my lunch piece actually about Kobbie Mainoo, who has now had a few games under his belt for the academy. And I think it's time, especially before the international break, it would be such a shame not to see him at this stage of the season if he doesn't play against Luton. I'm not saying start him because the midfield was...
Did he... You said he didn't train on Tuesday.
He was with the under-19s, yeah.
Right.
So he played against Copenhagen in the 19s, 45 minutes.
Right.
Then he played against Salford when I was there. And then he played in the UEFA Youth League for 90 minutes as well. Which is a bit strange, I thought, actually, because Forson was on the bench. But look, they're saying it's to carefully manage his minutes after injury. I would like to see him in some capacity towards the end of the game.
You certainly
anyways.
want him in the squad for this. And if they are somehow... If the game is somehow boxed off with half an hour to go, then by all means send him off. But that's the other issue with United. They've had 6 wins in the league this season. They've all been by 1 goal. And the fact that we're even talking in somewhat pessimistic tones about the possibility of them struggling to beat Luton Town, who may be the most ill-prepared team to ever get promoted to the Premier League, just going off Kenilworth Road, does not say very much at all about United and the place they're in at the moment. I mean, in terms of change from the week, I probably wouldn't change that much. I mean, Rashford obviously can play because his red card, that suspension only applies to the Champions League.
That team worked though, Samuel, didn't it? For 40 minutes, it was excellent.
Yeah, so I suspect there won't be too many changes from the team Ten Hag picked. Obviously, if Evans is injured, then Evans and can't make the game, then he comes out and logically Varane goes in, but maybe he'll go with Lindelof. But again, in terms of undermining Ten Hag's position, as we talked about earlier, if you're going back to a partnership that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer settled on more than 4 years ago, you are in a bit of a pickle.
Ollie's at the wheel, put the contract on the table and sang it. Rich, before we go, do Wrexham allow Labradors into the stadium? Because Luton Town do.
Yeah, I don't believe so. One of my most depressing football moments was watching Wrexham against Luton Town, actually. Yeah. We'd finished about 20 points above them in the league. Obviously, we got them in the playoff semi-final. Half an hour in, we're 3-0 down. Season right off.
Wrexham just love conceding goals. Even more porous than United, and that's saying something.
Good times.
Thank you very much, Rich and Samuel.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to listeners as usual. Head across and check out our social channels. Have a great weekend. Take care.